Chapter 1. The Descent of Dignity. The fragrance of beeswax polished oak floorboards mingled with the scent of choice Earl Grey tea, drifting from the precious Wedgwood porcelain teapot. Inside the vast and opulent drawing room of Ravenswood Manor, the delicate titters of fashionable ladies resounded, offering a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere within. Today marked the first morning call of the London season. Though Ravenswood Manor lay far from the capital, situated in windswept and freezing Yorkshire, the local gentry nonetheless flocked in to gather intelligence from the Dowager Lady Catherine. They sought to learn if the young Duke, Benedict Vance, had survived the battlefield of Waterloo, or if this colossal estate would soon devolve upon his profligate cousin George Vance, under the strict entail of the family. They conversed eagerly of the subscription balls at Almack's, and the splendid carriages parading through Hyde Park, entirely ignoring the frigid reality of this northern countryside. In the corner of this splendid drawing room, Helena Vance knelt upon the cold stone hearth. Clad in a simple gown of ash-gray wool, her sleeves rolled high to reveal slender but firm forearms, she was employing a small brush to scrape away the thick black soot clinging to the marble mantelpiece. Her countenance was smudged with streaks of gray ash, and her chestnut hair was bound tidily at the nape of her neck with a cheap wooden hairpin. Although she bore the title of Duchess of Ravenswood, she was treated no differently than a low-ranking domestic servant. 3 years prior, she had entered this manor as Benedict's bride. Yet, on the morning immediately following their arranged marriage, he had ridden off to war, leaving her in the hands of his malicious stepmother Catherine and his scheming cousin George. They had entirely cut off her pin money, refused her any funds to purchase new gowns, and deliberately isolated her to force her departure. She had endured bitter winter nights without coal for warmth, and sparse meals of dry bread and thin broth, yet the emerald fire in her eyes had never once been extinguished. Nevertheless, rather than capitulating and weeping for pity, Helena had chosen another path for survival. She had voluntarily descended to the servants' quarters below stairs, sharing their labors and protecting them from Catherine's exploitation. She managed the estate ledgers, inspected the granaries, and performed cleaning tasks alongside them. She taught the housemaids their letters, assisted the gardeners in recording harvest yields, and stood to receive punishments on their behalf before Catherine's furious rages. Consequently, the world below stairs at Ravenswood had silently chosen to align with her. As Helena was cleaning the hearth, the young maid Mary crept quietly to her side, attempting to shield her from the ladies' gazes. Mary whispered, her voice filled with anxiety, "My lady, pray let me do this for you. You ought not to kneel here before them. Your back must be aching terribly." Helena smiled softly, a warm expression that dispelled the chill of the ashes. She shook her head slightly and whispered in return, "Let me be, Mary. Lest Lady Catherine see you and dock your wages, go down to the kitchen and see if the barley broth is ready." The loyalty of Mary and the servants below stairs had been a silent shield that kept Helena upright for 3 long years. They set aside the freshest butter and the warmest bread especially for her, while deliberately serving cold dishes to her stepmother and cousin. They knew she was the one who truly kept Ravenswood from falling into ruin. Lady Catherine set her porcelain teacup upon its saucer with exquisite grace. She sighed softly, her countenance displaying a theatrical anxiety. "My poor Benedict, the boy was swept up in that terrible war. He has not even had the leisure to write home. I only fear that the hasty marriage, contracted before his departure, has proved an additional burden to him. How could the daughter of a bankrupt baron ever hope to uphold the illustrious reputation of the House of Ravenswood?" As she spoke, Catherine cast a contemptuous glance toward Helena. George Vance, standing by the window and swirling his glass of sherry, remarked, "Benedict was obliged to wed her merely to secure a portion of the estate in accordance with our grandfather's will. Yet behold, our Duchess appears far more suited to the ashes of the hearth than to the drawing-room." Another round of tittering arose from the visiting ladies. Lady Catherine rose and glided toward the fireplace. In her hand she held the silver tray, bearing the calling cards of the gentry who had visited during the week. She stood immediately beside Helena, her expensive embroidered silk slippers resting a mere few inches from the young Duchess's grimy hand. "Oh, how exceedingly clumsy of me," Catherine exclaimed with artificial distress. She tilted her hand, letting all the prestigious cards scatter across the soot-covered floorboards, directly at Helena's feet. The pristine white cards bearing the names of illustrious families were now smudged with black coal dust. "Pray retrieve them for me, Helena. Mind you do not let your soiled fingers touch the lettering. Gather each card by the edges with the utmost care." Lady Westmoreland shifted her foot slightly, her leather-soled slipper pressing lightly upon the corner of a prominent calling card, watching Helena with a mocking smile. Helena ceased her scraping. She drew a deep breath, forcing her chest to remain steady against her rising indignation. She rose slowly, though clad in a worn gray dress with ash on her face. Her posture remained perfectly erect, her slender shoulders carrying a singular, unyielding composure. She looked directly into Lady Catherine's eyes, then shifted her gaze to Lady Westmoreland. She did not immediately kneel to gather the cards. Instead, she offered a slight bow, perfectly executed according to etiquette yet laden with a quiet defiance. Lady Westmoreland, Helena began, her voice clear, rich, and entirely devoid of any tremor of submission. If you would be so obliging as to lift the toe of your exquisite silk-embroidered slipper. I am persuaded that the soot from the Ravenswood hearth beneath your sole will damage the Brussels carpet which the Duke personally acquired from Belgium. I should be loath to see your ladyship's reputation for elegance compromised for the sake of a calling card. Lady Westmoreland turned pale, withdrawing her foot instantly as though she had trodden on hot embers. The attention of the entire room focused on Helena's sharp remark. Helena slowly knelt on one knee, her movements as fluid as a dancer in a waltz. She gathered each calling card, stacking them tidily on the silver tray. Upon rising, she looked directly at Lady Catherine. I have completed the hearth, Your Grace, Helena said, placing the silver tray upon the tea table. And I must also remind you that, as I hold sole responsibility for the preservation of the manor's material assets, your deliberate spoiling of Ravenswood's social cards may find small favor with the Duke upon his return, should he find the family's dignity compromised by such childish amusements. You dare presume to lecture me. Catherine trembled with rage. You are but the daughter of a debtor. Benedict abandoned you 3 years ago. The moment he returns, his first act will be to cast you out. George Vance stepped forward, setting down his glass with a sneer. Indeed, Helena. The entail is absolute. Should Benedict die without issue, Ravenswood belongs to me. And when I am master here, I shall have no need for a pretend duchess, who spends her time sweeping hearths in my house. Until that day arrives, George, Helena said, her voice quiet yet carrying through the silent chamber, you continue to live upon the allowance drawn from the estate accounts which require my approval. If you wish to secure your pocket money for the London gaming halls next month, I strongly advise you to adopt a more respectful tone when addressing the keeper of the keys. Having spoken, Helena turned on her heel and departed, her carriage straight and proud, leaving behind countenances contorted with rage. She knew the struggle to reclaim the manor from within had begun in earnest, and she had the entire world below stairs standing behind her. She descended the dark stone stairs to the kitchen, where the lively chatter died instantly at her entrance. The head cook, Mrs. Potts, took the tray from her, her face filled with indignation at the dowager's treatment. You ought not to be subjected to such labors, my lady, Mrs. Potts said, offering Helena a cup of hot chamomile tea. They will face their reckoning when the Duke returns. Helena took a sip, feeling the warmth of these honest souls. She whispered, the balance of power will shift soon, Mrs. Potts, we must simply be ready. Chapter 2. The return of the War Duke. That night, a violent blizzard swept across Yorkshire. The wind howled relentlessly through the barren oak groves surrounding Ravenswood Manor, creating eerie sounds akin to the wails of abandoned souls. Bitter hailstones battered the tall Gothic arched windows, making them rattle in the darkness. Yorkshire was in the depths of its most severe winter, a biting cold that threatened to freeze all life outside. Yet, within the great hall of the manor, the atmosphere was remarkably warm. The fire in the colossal marble hearth blazed bright with seasoned oak logs, casting a warm red glow that banished the chill and gloom of the winter night. Helena stood quietly at the foot of the grand polished oak staircase, as the antique brass grandfather clock behind her slowly chimed the midnight hour. She had changed into a simple gown of dark green wool, which, though worn and frayed at the hem, was meticulously clean and pressed. She held her small ledger, reviewing the day-end checklist with Mr. Brooks, the loyal butler of the Vance family. Is everything prepared, Brooks? Helena asked gently, her warm tone dispelling some of the tension brought by the storm. My lady, warm onion soup is ready in the earthenware pots. Hot water and fresh linens were taken to the Duke's master chambers an hour ago. The servants are at their posts, Brooks replied with a respectful bow. He regarded the young Duchess with deep respect and gratitude. Having served 3 generations of the House of Ravenswood, he had witnessed many changes, but he had never seen anyone manage the estate with such efficiency, resilience, and benevolence as Helena had over the past 3 years. Her fortitude had preserved the lives of all under this roof, from the lowest housemaid to the tenants in the valley. Had she not assumed stewardship, Ravenswood would have fallen into ruin under the neglect of the Dowager and George. Suddenly, the rapid gallop of hooves echoed from the carriage road, followed by the harsh grinding of wheels upon wet gravel. The heavy oak double doors of the hall were flung open from without. The storm surged in, carrying a freezing blast and swirling flakes of snow that danced through the air. A party entered. Foremost was a gentleman of tall stature and broad shoulders, clad in a waterlogged navy military greatcoat caked with snow. Removing his riding hat, he revealed damp black hair and features as sharp as if carved from stone. A long scar ran from beneath his left ear down to the collar of his white shirt, a mark from the brutal Battle of Waterloo where he had faced death. This was Benedict Vance, the 7th Duke of Ravenswood, the War Duke, renowned for his coldness and severity in battle. The great hall fell into absolute silence. Benedict swept his cold slate-gray gaze across the room. He had prepared himself to find Ravenswood Manor in disarray, burdened by the debts his stepmother and George had detailed in their letters. He had expected indolent servants and a weeping wife demanding her marriage portion. Yet the Ravenswood before him was clean, orderly, warm, and remarkably well-governed. Benedict was about to command the butler to take his coat when he paused, noting something peculiar. The servants did not look to him for instruction. The gazes of Mr. Brooks, Mary, and the rest of the household lined up in the hall were all directed toward the foot of the stairs, where Helena stood. They appeared to await some nod or silent assent from her before taking any action. This absolute loyalty was directed not to his ducal title but to her. This astonished Benedict. He was accustomed to soldiers obeying his commands without question, yet here, in his own home, the supreme authority seemed to rest in the hands of this slender lady. Lady Catherine and George now hurried down the stairs, their attire in disarray and their faces betraying their alarm. "Benedict, my dear son," Catherine cried, attempting a joyful smile as she approached. "You have returned. Good heavens, that scar upon your face. This house has been so cold and neglected in your absence. I have suffered terribly." Benedict did not look at his stepmother. He raised a black-gloved hand, stopping her short. The cold, decisive gesture silenced Catherine immediately, her face darkening with resentment. He looked directly toward the foot of the stairs. Helena stood there. She did not rush to embrace him, nor did she weep or show weakness. She stood quietly, her hazel eyes clear and steady as she looked at him, reflecting the firelight. She offered a perfect curtsy, a flawless display of noble breeding. "Welcome home, Your Grace," Helena said, her tone calm, warm, and entirely devoid of fear. "Warm water and ginger tea have been prepared in your study. Hot soup is being brought up. You ought to change out of your wet garments before the chill takes hold." Benedict walked slowly toward her, his leather boots clicking against the stone floor in the quiet hall. He stopped 3 paces from her, looking down at the wife he had left behind 3 years ago on the day after their wedding. He perceived a distinct change in the atmosphere of the manor. The real authority here had shifted. The lady before him was fragile bride. She had silently taken control of Ravenswood from within. He could feel the warmth and vitality that filled the house, something he had not anticipated after 3 years at war. "You remain here," Benedict said, his voice low and raspy, as cold as the wind outside yet carrying a subtle curiosity. "Ravenswood is my home, Your Grace," Helena replied, her gaze steady. "And it has been my duty to preserve it until your return." George Vance stepped forward with a sneer. "Benedict, do not let her deceive you. For 3 years she has usurped all management of the estate, treating my mother and me as strangers. The estate is heavily in debt, and she is the one responsible." Benedict ignored George, his natural caution keeping him alert. He looked at Helena. "I shall inspect the accounts myself tomorrow. I expect to see all financial reports for the past 3 years on my desk at 8 in the morning." Helena replied calmly. "They were prepared and placed on your desk 2 hours ago, Your Grace, along with a detailed report of the harvest yields and the debt status of each tenant. I wish you a restful night." She curtsied once more and turned to walk away with quiet elegance. Benedict watched her go, realizing that this forgotten duchess was a powerful enigma he must decipher. He retired to the master chambers, where a warm fire blazed, and everything was arranged with perfect care all under the direction of Helena. Chapter 3. The cry of our Duchess in the fields. The following morning, a dense fog shrouded the valleys of Yorkshire. The barren hills, blanketed in white snow, appeared indistinct under the pale light of dawn. A cold wind from the north whistled through the rocky crevices, carrying a freezing moisture that made one shiver. Benedict Vance resolved to personally inspect the farms and agricultural lands of the estate to assess the actual conditions, preparing to address the accusations of debt his stepmother had detailed in her letters to the front. Mounted on his black stallion, he rode along the bridle paths leading down to the northern valley. He had expected to see neglected fields, idle laborers, and the resentment of tenants ground down by excessive demands. Yet what met his eyes was quite the reverse. The drainage ditches had been cleared, the land was meticulously plowed, and green clover fields were being prepared for the new season. Everywhere showed the order and efficiency of exceptional management. Benedict halted his horse beside a field where more than a dozen tenants were at work. Observing the imposing Duke riding toward them, the laborers paused. Their countenances betrayed caution, coldness, and detachment. They merely stood, offering a reluctant nod in deference to his rank. Benedict spoke, addressing the eldest among them. "How fares the crop this year? Who directed the construction of this drainage system?" The old farmer regarded the Duke with a cold look, replying flatly, "Everything is satisfactory. Your Grace, we act under the orders of the estate manager." They showed no enthusiasm or respect for him, the head of the house who had abandoned them for 3 years to wage war. They remembered too well the freezing winter days when they had no food, and it was Helena who had knocked on their doors to offer aid. At that moment, the light trot of a horse and the soft rumble of wheels sounded in the distance. A simple carriage, devoid of any grand family crest, approached. When the door opened, Helena stepped down. She wore a simple gray riding habit, her leather boots covered with the mud of Yorkshire. The immediate shift in the tenant's demeanor astonished Benedict. The rough, hardened men who had treated the Duke with cold indifference now simultaneously removed their hats. They bowed low before Helena, their faces reflecting deep, genuine reverence. "Good day, my lady, you have arrived," the elderly farmer said, stepping forward with respect. "We have completed clearing the eastern ditch exactly as you directed. My wife has prepared a pitcher of fresh goat's milk in the cottage, should you care to try it." Another young farmer named Tim Ho's infant child Helena had saved from the winter typhus outbreak the previous year by bringing a private apothecary from town, at her own expense, stepped forward with emotion. "Thank you, my lady or duchess. Had it not been for your grain relief last winter, my family would not have survived the blizzard. You are the true duchess of this estate, we serve only your command." Old John also stepped forward, clutching his worn wool cap with tearful eyes. "My lady, we have distributed the seed wheat you sent from the manor's reserve granaries. Had it not been for you, the entire parish would have been reduced to beggary. The Duke in London or on the battlefield has never spared a thought for the empty bellies of his tenants. You alone are the true Duchess of Ravenswood." The cry of our Duchess echoed across the field, filled with gratitude and absolute loyalty. Benedict realized that to these people, his ducal title was a distant shadow that could vanish at any moment, while Helena was the true master who had delivered them from death. Benedict sat silently on his horse, staring at Helena's mud-spattered boots. The gently bred daughter of a deceased baron, who had once occupied elegant drawing rooms, now unhesitatingly stepped into the freezing Yorkshire mire. He felt a sharp contrast between her current image and the letters his stepmother Catherine had sent to the front, describing Helena as an indolent creature who merely drained the family coffers. Old John, noting Benedict's pensive expression, sighed and added, "Your Grace, did you know that 2 winters ago, when the blizzard isolated the estate and supplies ran dry, Her Grace walked 3 miles through the snow to bring medicine and warm broth to each cottage. She used her own hands to bind the wounds of the injured. To us, Ravenswood has but one duchess, and that is Lady Helena." Helena smiled warmly at them, offering a polite nod. She inquired after the health of their children and instructed them on mixing lime into the acidic soil before planting, her manner entirely natural and knowledgeable. Benedict stood by, witnessing the scene with profound shock. He saw the naked truth. He had abandoned this estate for 3 years, and in that time, his discarded wife had built an uncrowned kingdom upon his land. She had won the devotion of the tenants not through coercion or wealth, but through understanding, fairness, and courage. She had visited each thatched cottage, nursed sick children, and sold her mother's jewels to buy wheat. He also observed that the servants and tenants did not merely respect or obey her. They were prepared to defend her against any outside threat. She walked toward Benedict, her leather boots treading proudly on the Yorkshire mud. She looked up at him, her green eyes as calm as a still lake. "Are you inspecting the estate, Your Grace?" Helena asked softly. Benedict looked down at her, his voice low, filled with respect, mixed with caution. "They call you her Duchess." I have never seen the hardened farmers of Yorkshire bow to anyone as they bow to you. What have you done at Ravenswood these past 3 years? Helena smiled, a cool expression that did not reach her eyes. I did only what a true master must do when their home is abandoned. Sir, if you require the details, pray return to your study. I shall present the actual ledger. Benedict nudged his horse to walk beside her, his mind filled with conflicting thoughts about this extraordinary lady. He realized he owed her far too much, and the honor of the House of Ravenswood was being guarded by those mud-stained hands. Chapter 4. Authority below stairs. Helena entered the chamber, her carriage remaining serene, composed, and preeminently noble. She placed a small scarlet leather-bound pocketbook upon the table, immediately adjacent to the official estate ledger. Explain this, Benedict demanded, turning to regard her with a slate-gray gaze as piercing as the ice outside. Wherefore has the estate's debt increased by £5,000 during these past 3 years? And why is it that every tenant and servant in this parish answers to you alone? By what machinations have you usurped the authority of Ravenswood? He tapped his finger upon the official ledger, endeavoring to re-establish his absolute mastery. He wished to witness some submission, or at the very least a momentary confusion on her part, yet before him stood an immovable stone wall. Helena drew near the desk, looking directly into his eyes without yielding in the slightest to the formidable pressure of the renowned War Duke. Your Grace, if you truly wish to comprehend that deficit of £5,000, pray be so good as to open my red notebook. That is the actual record of Ravenswood's financial transactions. The official ledger you hold is but a clever fabrication concocted by Lady Catherine and George to conceal their embezzlement. She opened the red notebook, pointing to the small, precise handwriting that meticulously recorded every penny spent, the allowance of £3,000 per annum which you sent from the continent. It never arrived at Ravenswood to sustain the estate. It was diverted directly into Lady Catherine's private accounts in London to fund her lavish entertainments, her costly gowns, and George's gaming debts at his gentlemen's clubs. In this parish, had I not made us self-sufficient and sold off some of the mature oak timber from the south, the servants would have had no wages, the tenants no seed wheat, and this manor would have collapsed under the weight of the winter blizzards. I have not taken a single farthing for myself. She pointed her slender finger to the specific entries. Look here, Your Grace. The 12th of December last. £20 for coal to prevent the servants and northern tenants from freezing. The 15th of January, £15 for reserve flour for the kitchens. The 20th of February, £30 to discharge the servants' wages. Every penny of these sums was secured by my own hand, by selling my mother's emerald earrings at a pawnshop in York. I possess no legal authority to sign the ledgers, for the old entail and marriage settlement denied me any control over the estate finances without your consent or George's. I was but an abandoned wife left without a penny, yet the servants below stairs and the tenants in the fields chose to align with me, because I alone fought to save them from starvation during the bitter winters. They are loyal to me because I was loyal to their survival. I kept these records not to demand recompense, but so that Ravenswood might endure. Benedict remained silent. His accusations had struck an unyielding wall. He looked deep into her emerald eyes, discerning the resentment yet immense pride hidden within. Helena's remarkable fortitude astonished him. A complex mixture of emotions stirred in his chest: admiration for her extraordinary capability, and a belated self-reproach for having left her to face the wolves of his own family for 3 long years. He felt himself despicable for having doubted such a noble lady. He had fought abroad for the honor of his house, while his wife had been forced to sell her heirloom jewelry to pay the housemaids under his own roof. Helena drew from her pocket a carefully handwritten parchment draft, placing it on the desk before him. I require a new arrangement, Your Grace, a legal agreement of protection and estate management between us. First, Helena Vance shall possess absolute control over all domestic expenditure of the manor. Second, no person shall interfere with the hiring or dismissal of domestic staff without my consent. Third, the Duke shall provide a fixed monthly pin money of £50, paid directly into my private account at Cootes Bank. Fourth, in return I pledge to clear Ravenswood of its debts and restore agricultural yields within 1 year. I do not require your affection, sir. I require only the authority to protect those who have placed their faith in me. Should you decline, I shall depart this day, taking my management with me. Benedict raised his brow, looking at the contract and then at the resolute lady before him. He recognized that permitting her to manage the estate was the most prudent course, allowing him the leisure to address his war wounds and the political intrigues of London. He understood that without her, Ravenswood would instantly descend into chaos. He took up his quill and signed his name beneath her script with determination. Benedict Vance, Duke of Ravenswood. He pressed the family's red wax seal upon the parchment, then slid it back to her. "The agreement is struck, madam," Benedict said, his eyes dark yet reflecting an unprecedented respect. "I expect you to fulfill your promise." Helena took up the document, curtsying politely. "I shall not disappoint you, your grace." As she stepped out of the study, she encountered Lady Catherine standing in the corner of the corridor, consumed with rage. Helena spoke not a word, she merely held up the document with its red wax seal before her stepmother, permitting herself a triumphant smile. She had reclaimed the manor from within, and the game had now entirely changed. Chapter 5. Reopening the abandoned ballroom a week after Benedict's return, Helena Vance resolved to execute a bold stroke to assert her real authority over Ravenswood Manor. She decided to reopen the grand ballroom, a chamber that had been locked, abandoned, and left to gather dust for 10 years since the late Duke's demise. This ballroom was the very heart of Ravenswood, the symbol of the Vance family's prosperity and majesty. Reopening the ballroom was not merely to prepare for a spring ball to welcome the Duke home, but was also a decisive declaration to Lady Catherine and George that Helena was now the true master here. The ballroom possessed a ceiling, 40 feet high, adorned with beautiful Renaissance frescoes depicting ancient deities and legendary romances, though all now lay shrouded in darkness and dust. That morning, Helena stood before the massive, intricately carved oak doors of the ballroom, holding the heavy brass ring of antique keys. Lady Catherine and George Vance, having caught wind of her intentions, hurried to the spot, their faces contorted with rage. Catherine stepped forward, attempting to snatch the keys from Helena's hand, shrieking, "Have you lost your senses, Helena? This ballroom has been sealed these past 10 years. No person has the right to open it without my command or that of the Duke. You are but an impostor, forbidden to lay hands upon the symbol of our family." George joined in. "Indeed, you low scullery maid, return to your office. Do not defile this place. Do you intend to incite rebellion at Ravenswood? You hold no authority here, do not force me to use physical means to eject you." Helena did not flinch. Stepping back, she spoke in a clear, authoritative tone that echoed through the stone hall. "In accordance with the estate management agreement signed and sealed with the red wax of Duke Benedict Vance, I possess absolute authority over the domestic affairs and assets of this mansion. Reopening the ballroom falls within my purview, as we prepare for the assembly of the tenants and local gentry. Lady Catherine, should you wish to obstruct this, pray present written authorization from the Duke." She looked directly into Catherine's eyes, entirely unfazed by the dowager's presence. Catherine stamped her foot in fury. "You servants. Not one of you is to assist her. Whosoever dares touch that door shall be dismissed instantly. I am still the Dowager Duchess of this house. My word remains supreme. Do you wish to be cast out into the winter cold?" Yet Catherine's threats fell upon empty air. Mr. Brooks stepped forward, bowing respectfully to Helena. "My lady, we are prepared." Behind him, more than 20 of the estate's domestic staff, from the kitchen maids and gardeners to the housekeepers, stood in an orderly line. In their hands they held brooms, buckets, polish, and cloths. They completely ignored the Dowager Duchess's shouting. Their eyes were fixed solely upon Helena, awaiting her command. Their choice was plain. They stood with the lady who had shared their dark days and split her bread with them. They trusted her stewardship to lead the estate out of its stagnation. Brooks cast a cool glance toward Catherine, adding in a quiet tone, "Dowager Duchess, our wages are paid from the accounts approved by Lady Helena, and we serve only the true keeper of the keys of Ravenswood." "Proceed, Brooks," Helena instructed softly. Brooks immediately inserted the key and turned it. The massive oak doors swung open with a long groan from rusty hinges that echoed through the stone corridors. A draft of chilly air, carrying the scent of dust and the past, rushed out. Yet the servants did not hesitate, entering at once under Helena's guidance. They began sweeping away the dust, polishing the massive crystal chandeliers, waxing the oak floorboards, and rehanging the deep crimson velvet drapes. Helena joined in the labor herself, helping Mary clean the marble statues surrounding the ballroom, her face bright under the sunlight filtering through the tall Gothic arched windows. She guided the servants with meticulous attention, transforming a chamber that had been dark for 10 years into a sanctuary of light in a matter of hours. Mary whispered as she cleaned, "My lady, Lady Catherine kept this room locked for 10 years, because she could not bear to see the family's glory restored by another's hand. But you have opened it. We shall cleanse every corner to celebrate the rebirth of Ravenswood." The other maids joined in cheerfully, the sound of brooms and polishing cloths creating an energetic atmosphere that had not been heard in this cold manor for many years. Mrs. Potts brought warm tea and biscuits up from the kitchen, the laughter and bustle drowning out the sound of the wind outside. They worked together with pride and absolute loyalty. Standing on the gallery above, Benedict Vance observed the scene in silence. He watched Helena direct the servants with ease, and noted their enthusiasm and devotion to her. He saw the vibrant Renaissance frescoes emerge from beneath the dust, and the white marble statues gleam under the spring sun that filtered through the newly washed Gothic windows. He realized that the authority of a duchess lay not in fine dresses or frivolous tea parties in London, but in the inner strength that allowed her to govern this manor from within. Helena had opened the doors of Ravenswood, banishing the shadow of 10 years and bringing new life to his ancestral home. Moreover, the servants' defiance of Catherine's orders was clear proof that Helena had established a quiet but firm kingdom below stairs. Benedict felt a deep stirring in his heart, a growing respect and affection for his neglected wife. He resolved to speak with her in the study that evening, to put right the errors of the past and ensure she stood alone no longer. Chapter 6: Confrontation in the winter night. That night, the blizzard outside Yorkshire raged unabated. A freezing chill crept through the crevices of Ravenswood Manor, creating melancholy sighs. Helena was in the grand ballroom, which had just been cleaned, holding a small candle to inspect the corners and marble statues to ensure no dust remained. The ballroom had regained its brilliance and splendor under the care of herself and the servants, yet in the late hours of the night, it possessed a singular tranquility and somber beauty. She stroked the freshly washed crimson velvet drapes, feeling peace in her heart after a long and exhausting day. She knew that reopening this room was a decisive step in establishing her complete dominion over the estate. As Helena was inspecting the velvet drapes, she heard heavy, measured footsteps echoing from the door of Benedict's study. She turned to leave, but was arrested by a low, agonized groan emanating from his small library. Recognizing Benedict's voice, Helena hurriedly pushed the door open. The chamber was lit only by a dying candle on the mahogany desk. Benedict sat in a large leather armchair, his countenance pale with agony, cold sweat running down his brow. His white shirt was half undone at the left shoulder, exposing a large, jagged, reddened scar that ran from his collarbone down to his chest, the mark of a shell fragment from Waterloo. The sudden damp and cold of Yorkshire had caused his old wound to inflame severely. Benedict was attempting to bind the wound himself with a single hand, but the awkward angle made it exceedingly difficult. "Let me assist you," Helena said softly, stepping quickly to his side. Benedict started, instinctively drawing his shirt up to conceal the wound and attempting to regain his usual stern coldness. "It is unnecessary, Helena. I can manage. It is but an old wound of no great consequence." Yet Helena did not yield, fetching the basin of warm water and the jar of soothing salve from the table. She gently brushed his hands aside. "You have a fever, Your Grace. You have granted me the authority to manage this estate. Pray allow me to tend to this wound. It is my duty to the husband who has protected me before society." Benedict looked into Helena's resolute emerald eyes, then sighed in defeat, leaning back to allow her to proceed. Helena dipped a clean cloth into the warm water, wrung it out, and gently cleansed the sweat and dried blood around the scar. Her fingers brushed against his fevered skin, causing Benedict to shiver slightly at the cool gentleness of her touch. He watched her face closely in the candlelight. She was entirely focused, her brow slightly furrowed in sympathy as she examined the jagged scar, the grim legacy of war upon his body. "Have you suffered this pain these past 3 years?" Helena asked softly, her tone softening with deep empathy. She gently wiped his collarbone, her heart full of sympathy. "It is nothing compared to the comrades who remained at Waterloo," Benedict replied, his voice low, his eyes never leaving her delicate features. "This pain reminds me that I still draw breath. 3 years ago, I was compelled to wed you to satisfy my father's will. I despised the arrangement, detesting the prospect of marrying a stranger merely to secure Ravenswood. That was why I departed immediately for the battlefield. Yet I did not realize that the true coward who fled was myself. I left you alone to bear all the consequences." Helena applied a layer of cool ointment to the scar, then carefully bound his shoulder with white gauze. Her movements were deft and gentle, as though she had performed this task many times. As she tied the final knot, her fingers brushed lightly against his broad shoulder. Benedict suddenly reached out, catching Helena by the wrist. His grip was not harsh, but firm enough to hold her. He turned her hand over, exposing her palm to the candlelight. Under the warm glow of the candle, Benedict clearly saw Helena's palm. It was not the hand of a gently bred lady who had never touched hard labor. Her palm was rough, with distinct calluses at the base of her fingers and along the edge of her hand. These were calluses from holding a pen to write ledgers late into the night under dim candlelight, from personally inspecting farm implements, and even from cleaning the manor when Lady Catherine reduced the household staff. Benedict's chest tightened, a profound regret and sorrow filled the eyes of the cold duke. He spoke, his voice raspy. "Why does the hand of a Duchess of Ravenswood bear such calluses?" "Helena, I left £3,000 a year for you." Helena made a slight effort to withdraw her hand, but Benedict held it fast, his thumb gently stroking the rough calluses on her hand, as if seeking to soothe the hardships she had endured. "I have told you, Your Grace," Helena said, looking directly into his eyes, her tone calm yet proud. "That money never reached Ravenswood. Lady Catherine diverted it directly to her own accounts to purchase gowns and discharge George's gaming debts. To preserve the estate from foreclosure, and to protect the loyal servants from being cast out, I had to perform these tasks myself. I feel no shame for these hands." Benedict closed his eyes, remorse surging like waves in his mind. He had gone to the battlefield to fight for the honor of his family, believing his wife was living in luxury at home. But the truth was, he had left her alone to face the cruelty of his stepmother and the greed of George. She had fought a lonely and brutal battle, far worse than his own war, to protect Ravenswood, his home, the honor of his line. Benedict opened his eyes, his gray gaze no longer cold but filled with tenderness, regret, and reverence. He raised Helena's calloused hand, gently pressing a respectful kiss upon her palm. His warm breath touched her skin, making Helena shiver slightly, a novel sensation coursing through her. "Forgive me, Helena," Benedict whispered, his voice trembling with emotion. "I left you alone in what was my own battle, but from this day forward you shall not fight alone. Ravenswood is yours, and so I shall ensure those who have wronged you pay the price." Helena looked at the proud duke bowing before her. She perceived his sincerity and his pain. She placed her other hand gently on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his body through the gauze. She assisted him in putting on a clean shirt, then gathered the warm water basin before departing, leaving Benedict in the study with a heart filled with deep reverence and regret. She knew that his spiritual wounds were beginning to heal through her presence. Chapter 7. The Ascent of the Silent Empire. The evening of the assembly of the tenants and local gentry in the Ravenswood ballroom arrived. This was the largest event hosted at the estate in 10 years. The ballroom shone under the light of thousands of beeswax candles and massive, glittering crystal chandeliers. A gentle spring breeze from Yorkshire blew through the open Gothic arched windows, carrying the fragrance of young grass and wildflowers. Lady Catherine and George Vance had deliberately invited a group of supercilious nobles from London, with the malicious intent of turning this gathering into a laughingstock of the countryside and humiliating the housekeeper Duchess before the public. They wished to demonstrate that Helena lacked the breeding to host a grand assembly, and would be shunned by the fashionable world. The London guests stepped down from their carriages with haughty airs, waving peacock feather fans, and casting disdainful glances at the northern rural surroundings. Helena Vance appeared like a goddess of pride and quiet authority. She wore an exquisitely tailored gown of deep emerald silk satin, which accentuated her graceful stature and fair skin. Her warm auburn hair was dressed in an elegant coiffure, adorned with a small emerald tiara, an ancestral heirloom of the House of Ravenswood that Benedict had personally restored to her. She walked with a slow, deliberate pace, her posture perfectly erect, her emerald eyes shining with unshakable confidence. At her entrance, the London clique invited by Catherine began to whisper with mocking sneers. "Look, our housekeeper has finally donned silk. Yet how is Yorkshire mud ever to be cleansed from those rough hands? It is quite a farce." Yet Catherine and George's machinations failed entirely. As Helena entered the ballroom, the demeanor of the assembled guests immediately shifted. More than 100 tenants, local gentry, and the entire domestic staff of Ravenswood bowed low before her. This absolute respect and loyalty was paid not to some decorative noblewoman, but to the true Duchess who had preserved their lives through the famine. They lined the path, looking upon her with boundless gratitude. They regarded her as the sole provider of sustenance during the 3 years she had spent in the Duke's absence. Several elderly farmers were visibly moved as she glided past, removing their caps and whispering blessings. The affection of the local populace for Helena was so warm and intense that it completely drowned out the malicious murmurs of the London guests. Baron Darcy, a prominent and respected local gentleman, stepped forward to bow before her, saying aloud, "Good evening, Lady Helena. Your presence is the greatest honor to Yorkshire. Without your wisdom, we should not be assembled here tonight. The prosperity of this estate is due entirely to your hands. The Duke is exceedingly fortunate to have such a lady to bear this burden." Darcy's voice carried across the room, receiving nods of approval from all the local landholders. A sumptuous banquet of roast Yorkshire meats and fine wines added to the elegance of the evening. The local ladies also expressed their quiet admiration for the resilient Duchess. The harpsichord played sweet, classical melodies, dispelling the former gloom of the manor. The tenants stood proudly alongside the gentry, knowing they were under the protection of a Duchess who possessed both heart and vision. At that moment the trumpet sounded, announcing the arrival of Duke Benedict Vance. Benedict entered the ballroom in a state of absolute majesty, clad in a black evening suit embroidered with silver thread. He carried the imposing presence of a commander returned from the jaws of death. The room held its breath. Catherine and George smiled triumphantly, expecting Benedict to ascend the dais where everyone would bow to him, pushing Helena aside to expose her isolation. Yet a scene unprecedented in the history of the Vance family unfolded before Benedict's eyes. As he entered, he observed every person in the hall, from Brooks the butler, the housemaids, and the tenants to the local gentry, simultaneously bow deeply to Helena first. They offered her the highest respect, as though she were the true ruler of the estate, demonstrating that their loyalty was hers before it was his. Benedict stood frozen, witnessing the entire manor bow to his wife. A silence fell over the hall, broken only by the spring breeze rustling the velvet drapes. He realized that Helena had won the heart of Ravenswood, and his own title was secondary. The submission of this vast estate to this lady was a powerful testament to her quiet reign. Benedict felt pride rather than resentment. Benedict showed no anger at this silent transfer of power. On the contrary, a feeling of pride and deep respect arose in the chest of the proud Duke. He looked upon the resolute lady standing erect to receive the homage of the entire estate, and slowly approached her. Before the astonished gazes of hundreds of guests, the Cold War Duke bowed low before his wife, gently raising her calloused hand to press a respectful kiss upon it. "Welcome, my Duchess," Benedict said, his deep tone echoing through the ballroom. "You have restored the glory of Ravenswood, and I am but a servant to your administration." The entire assembly was stunned by this public recognition. The malicious gossip of the London clique was instantly crushed. Lady Catherine and George Vance stood near the dais, their faces contorted with rage and fear. They realized that Helena was no longer the scullery maid they could trample upon. She had become the true, supreme Duchess of Ravenswood, holding the hearts and loyalty of the entire estate. Benedict took her hand, standing beside her like a loyal champion protecting his queen from all storms. The room erupted into applause, and Helena's reputation from this day forward extended far beyond Yorkshire. Chapter 8. Judgment under the oil lamps. As the ball was underway, George Vance suddenly stepped onto the dais of the grand ballroom. His face betrayed a desperate fury and ambition, as he saw control slip entirely from his grasp. In his hand he held a collection of parchment documents sealed with the red wax of the family solicitor's office. Raising the documents before the gathered guests, he shouted, "Hold, everyone. Let us not be deceived by this pretend Duchess. I hold in my hand the supreme legal instruments, the debt agreements and the transfer of the mining rights for the southern coalfields of Ravenswood, signed by my own hand as the authorized representative in Benedict's absence. This estate is currently burdened with £5,000 of debt, and Helena Vance has conspired with our former solicitor, Mr. Harrison, to falsify the accounts and embezzle the family's assets. She is but a covetous creature seeking to enrich herself at the expense of the House of Vance." Murmurs of astonishment and confusion rippled through the ballroom. A few of the London gentry who had accompanied Catherine began to whisper mockingly, "Is this clever Duchess indeed but a financial swindler? What a disgraceful scandal for the Vance family." Lady Catherine hurried forward to join him, attempting a triumphant smile. "Benedict, do you see now, she has taken advantage of your absence to drain Ravenswood's coffers. Summon the local constable to apprehend her immediately. Such low-bred creatures have no place in this house." Helena Vance stood at the center of the ballroom, her demeanor calm to the point of being unsettling. She showed no fear or agitation in the face of these blatant accusations. She quietly drew from the small velvet purse at her waist her red leather notebook, the secret ledger she had kept in silence for 3 years. She regarded George with a cold look of profound contempt. She knew the moment for their undoing had arrived. "I have long anticipated this hour, George," Helena said, her voice clear and carrying through the vast room. immediately silencing the whispers. Did you believe you could employ those falsified papers to seize Ravenswood? You have made a most foolish error in assuming I lacked the evidence to refute you. Your actions in the Duke's absence are fully recorded here. She turned to look at Benedict, and then addressed the family council and the guests. I wish to call the new family solicitor, Mr. Thorne. The doors of the ballroom opened, and Mr. Thorne entered, carrying a small leather chest. Opening the chest, Mr. Thorne read aloud a medical certificate from the Medical Society of London. Your Grace and members of the family council, the debt agreement executed by Mr. George Vance with the former solicitor Mr. Harrison in the autumn of 1814 is entirely illegal and fabricated. At that precise date, Mr. Harrison was paralyzed due to a severe stroke in London, losing all use of his right hand and the capacity to sign any document. This medical record is signed by Dr. Hafford himself, who attended him. The ballroom erupted in astonishment. George Vance turned pale, snarling, "No. This is slander. The seal on the document is authentic. She has bribed the solicitor." Helena opened her red notebook, placing it firmly on the table. The sum of £5,000 was indeed withdrawn from Ravenswood, but its destination was not my account. Mr. Thorne, pray present the transaction records from Coutts & Co. Mr. Thorne read clearly. According to the official transaction records from London, the sum of £5,000 was transferred directly to the account of a gaming establishment and financial exchange in Paris, under the name of the beneficiary, George Vance. The authorization document for this withdrawal bears the signature of Mr. George Vance with a guarantee signed by Lady Catherine. No, this is a fabrication. She has the forged bank documents. Catherine shrieked in panic, the pearls about her neck trembling. Her heavily powdered face turned ash white, her usual arrogance vanishing entirely. George Vance recoiled, cold sweat gathering on his brow. He looked around the room, but the gazes that had previously regarded Helena with disdain were now fixed on him with utter disgust. Embezzlement, forging the signature of a deceased solicitor to steal estate funds while the head of the family fought for his life on the battlefield. This was an unforgivable offense. He knew his career and standing in society were finished. "Silence," George roared, his fear turning to fury. He lunged toward Helena to snatch the red notebook. Yet before he could even touch the hem of her gown, a tall figure blocked his path. Benedict Vance stepped forward, catching George by the wrist before he could lay a finger on her. The bones in George's wrist creaked under Benedict's iron grip. George cried out in pain, sinking to his knees on the floor. Benedict flung his wrist aside, commanding the local constables who had been waiting outside. "Take George Vance. Deliver him to the authorities along with these forged documents. The charges of fraud and forgery shall be tried at the assizes. George Vance's name is hereby expunged from the line of succession of this family." He turned a freezing gaze upon Catherine. "You have 24 hours to collect your personal effects. You shall depart Ravenswood Manor and reside at the Dower House, on the northern boundary of the estate. You shall receive no allowance beyond the minimum pin money specified in my late father's marriage settlement. Should you attempt to enter this estate again, I shall release these documents to the editors of the London papers for the season." Catherine sank into a velvet armchair, realizing her defeat was total. Mr. Brooks and the servants stood ready to enforce the Duke's orders. The guests watched in silence as the Duke delivered his judgment, ending the reign of greed and deceit. Chapter 9. The First Dance of Devotion. The shocking scandal at Ravenswood Manor quickly spread across Yorkshire and flew straight to London like a tempest. The ruin of George Vance and the banishment of Lady Catherine from the castle proper became the primary subject of gossip among the aristocracy. Yet at Ravenswood, true peace and glory returned. The gloomy atmosphere of 3 years of war vanished entirely, replaced by the bustle of an estate reviving strongly under Helena's stewardship and Benedict's protection. All operations of the estate had now entered an orderly routine, bringing great confidence to all the tenants. That evening, the local orchestra began to play the sweet soaring strains of a waltz by Mozart. The ballroom was brilliantly illuminated by thousands of beeswax candles, and the soft scent of wild roses filled the air. Benedict stepped before Helena. He bowed courtly, extending his hand with great tenderness. "May I have the honor of the first dance with the Duchess of Ravenswood?" Helena looked at him, her quiet emerald eyes softening, and placed her slender hand in his warm palm. They stepped into the center of the illuminated ballroom. Benedict placed his arm about her waist, guiding her through the turns of the lively waltz. The fluid coordination between the two created a perfect picture of masculine strength and feminine intellect. The domestic staff stood by, holding their breath, their hearts filled with pride for the Duchess who had saved the estate. The waltz carried them past the painful memories of 3 years of separation toward a future bright with hope. Every step of Benedict's was filled with care, his grip upon her waist firm as if to shield her from all the tempests of the outer world. She felt the warmth and strength of his solid arm, a true support she had lacked for 3 long years. The rhythm of the waltz seemed to bridge the distance between 2 souls that had been wounded. As the music turned, Benedict inclined his head, his deep voice carrying only to her ears. "Helena, I owe you my most sincere apology. For 3 years on that terrible battlefield, I was surrounded by the shadow of death and by suspicion. When Catherine's letters arrived accusing you of embezzlement, I allowed doubt to cloud my judgment. I left you alone to face dangers in my own home. I have never felt such regret and self-reproach as I do now, seeing all you have endured. My own physical scars of war are nothing compared to the wounds of the heart you bore to protect Ravenswood. I had expected to return to a ruined house, yet you preserved it with your very life. Grant me the opportunity to prove my sincerity. Trust me once more, I wish to make amends with all that I possess." Helena looked up at him, her emerald eyes reflecting the candlelight. "Benedict, 3 years ago I consented to this marriage solely out of duty to my late father's bankrupt estate. Yet, when you departed the following morning, I realized I could not remain a lady who merely wept and awaited the pity of fate. I had to live, and I had to protect those who placed their faith in me. The servants below stairs and the tenants in the fields gave me the strength to stand firm. I do not require your guilt or your charity. I require only that you understand that Ravenswood has changed, and I have learned to stand independent before the storm. If you wish to walk beside me, you must respect this administration and my independence." She recalled the freezing winter nights when she had warmed herself by a single candle, wondering if he spared a thought for his wife in Yorkshire, or if he had forgotten Helena entirely. Benedict saw the fleeting sorrow in her eyes, his heart tightening with remorse. He gently squeezed her hand, his steps fluid as they spun to the music. "I was wrong to remain silent. I believed myself a broken veteran from Waterloo, unworthy of a gently bred wife. I feared bringing darkness to you, but now I know that you are the sole light guiding me out of the abyss of war. Allow me to protect you from this day forward, I understand, Helena," Benedict continued, his slate-gray eyes filled with reverence and sincere affection. "You have not only saved the estate, you have preserved the honor and the very soul of the Vance family from ruin. From this day forward, Ravenswood is yours under your absolute direction. I shall be the loyal champion of your administration, supporting you in every decision. I require no contract or agreement to bind my loyalty and love to you. My heart was entirely won the moment I saw this entire manor bow before you. Allow me to stand beside you as a true husband, sharing all your burdens. When we return to London together for the next session of Parliament, the entire ton shall look upon the true Duchess of Ravenswood." Helena smiled, a warm expression that reached her eyes for the first time. The waltz carried them through the lively measures, the emerald skirt of her gown swirling on the oak floorboards like a blossom in spring. A tender warmth crept into their hearts after the long cold years of war and isolation. Benedict looked upon his remarkable wife, swearing in his heart to spend his life making amends and bringing her happiness. He knew this affection was the greatest reward he had won after returning from the jaws of death. The entire hall resounded with enthusiastic applause and warm congratulations, marking Helena's absolute triumph and the rebirth of Ravenswood. They knew the path ahead would bring many challenges at their London townhouse, but they would face them together. Chapter 10. The new dawn of Ravenswood spring had indeed arrived in Yorkshire. The barren oak hills of winter were now draped in a vibrant green mantle of young leaves, interspersed with carpets of bright yellow wildflowers stretching to the horizon. Under the warm morning sun, Ravenswood Manor appeared imposing and full of new life. The singing of thrushes in the ancient branches, the cheerful voices of servants cleaning below stairs, and the lively chatter of tenants in the fields created a harmonious melody of peace and warmth. Fresh meltwater streams bubbled through the new underground drainage channels, irrigating the fertile valley. Helena Vance stood on the marble balcony of the master suite, letting the cool spring breeze play with her chestnut hair. She wore a simple yet elegant white muslin gown, her skin glowing in the early light. The 3 turbulent, lonely years of facing her stepmother's malice and her cousin's greed were past. She had reclaimed the manor from within, establishing a new order of justice and prosperity for Ravenswood. She had brought happiness and comfort to hundreds of lives. As Helena stood admiring the peaceful view, Mr. Brooks and the housemaid Mary approached. bearing a small silver tray with a bouquet of early spring roses and a warm, freshly baked cake. Brooks bowed with deep respect. "My lady, this is a token from all of us below stairs to greet you on this first morning of spring. We are eternally grateful for your protection and courage over the past 3 years. You shall ever remain our true Duchess." Helena accepted the roses with emotion, her bright smile illuminating the balcony. "I thank you all. Ravenswood has survived the storm because of our shared loyalty and diligence. Let us ensure the new season is met with equal industry. We shall work hard together to make the estate prosper. I shall descend to the kitchen to thank everyone presently." Mrs. Potts had also embroidered a wildflower tablecloth to present to Helena. She accepted the modest gift with great joy. She discussed with the staff the plans to rebuild the greenhouses to secure fresh vegetables for the coming winter, ensuring abundant provisions for the entire manor. Her consideration and care moved the maids deeply. Helena explained the details of crop rotation for the northern farms, which would improve soil yields and elevate the livelihoods of each tenant family in the near future. Every servant listened with profound respect. After the servants withdrew, a pair of strong, steady hands gently clasped her waist from behind, drawing her back against a warm chest. Benedict rested his head in the hollow of her shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of lemon balm from her hair. His old shoulder wound had healed completely under Helena's care, and the melancholic shadows of Waterloo had faded before the warmth of their love. He felt himself the most fortunate man alive to have her by his side, the resolute lady who had guarded the honor of his house in his absence. "Of what do you contemplate, Helena?" Benedict asked, his deep voice carrying a soft tenderness to her ear. "I am observing the wheat fields in the northern valley," Helena replied, turning within his embrace to face him, her green eyes filled with joy. "They are progressing remarkably well. The new underground drainage system worked flawlessly during the late rains. The tenants are quite optimistic. They need no longer fear destitution. I am content to see everyone provided for." Benedict looked down at his remarkable wife, then slowly sank to one knee upon the stone floor of the balcony. To her astonishment, from his pocket he drew a small velvet box containing the ancestral eagle ring, set with a magnificent emerald and surrounded by rows of glittering diamonds. This ring symbolized the strength and glory of Ravenswood through generations. He looked up at her, his gray eyes filled with sincerity and deep affection. "Helena, 3 years ago we wed out of duty and the legal mandates of my father's will. But today, I stand and kneel before you not as a cold duke, but as a man who loves you with his whole soul. I require no legal agreement to bind us, I ask only for your heart. Will you consent to be the true Duchess of my life, sharing the stewardship of Ravenswood through all storms to come? I wish to love, honor, and protect you for all my days. Let me be your strongest support. I want the world to know that you are the true ruler of this estate and of my heart. I shall remain by your side forever, never to depart again. Let our love write a new chapter of glory for Ravenswood. You are my only Duchess." Tears of joy rolled down Helena's cheeks, but a bright smile illuminated her face. She knelt beside him, wrapping her arms about his neck, whispering in happiness, "I do consent, Benedict. I will be your Duchess, not merely by the dictates of a solicitor's pen or a will, but with the sincere affection of my heart. We shall sustain Ravenswood together through all the changes of this life." Benedict slid the emerald ring onto her finger, then held her fast in a warm embrace under the brilliant spring sun. Down in the courtyard, Brooks, Mary, and the rest of the staff witnessed the scene and erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the estate. Ravenswood had survived its bitter winter, and a new dawn of hope had begun under the reign of Duchess Helena Vance and Duke Benedict Vance. They stood together on the balcony, hand in hand, prepared to meet whatever trials the future might bring, knowing their love would always remain the beacon of Ravenswood. The path ahead might hold challenges in their London townhouse, but they knew they would always have each other to lean on and protect their home.